Hi, welcome to the second edition of Why Money Matters. Today I'm going to discuss the importance of why it is so important to have an emergency fund. I'm going to give you 3 very important pointers pertaining to emergency funds. The first one, why an emergency fund? The second one, what are the most common pitfalls and traps people fall into when they consider emergency funds? And 3, what investment vehicle will be the best suited for an emergency fund? Please watch to the end because there will be a small bonus I will be sharing with you. And also, if you want more of this information, please hit the subscribe button at the bottom and hit the like button. So let's jump right into it. So the first point, why an emergency fund? I must say it's quite a coincidence that we are at this point in our country, actually in the world, when we have this worldwide lockdown because of the COVID-19 virus. Everything came to an abrupt standstill. The whole world has shut down. Everybody is basically staying at home, not being able to move, and this will have the result that many people will lose their jobs. Many small businesses will close. It's quite an extraordinary time in the world that certainly I have never seen in my life before. All of a sudden, most of us are confronted with the reality. Am I prepared for something like this? Have I made provisions? Have I made plans to make sure I can get through something like this? Facing this crisis, I actually did a little bit of a test. I phoned 3 of my friends, actually 2, and 1 my bank manager, to find out whether they would be able to borrow me money in a time like this. So let's see what happened. I'm sitting here this morning and I'm quite disturbed because we're in this 21 day which has been extended lockdown, and I've run out of money. I don't have any options. I looked around the house, I scratched in the cupboards, I can't find any money. So I hope I'm going to try and phone a trusted friend or 2. I hope the first one will be able to lend me some money. So I'm going to phone my friend and find out whether he can help me.
Hello.
Good morning, Jan. How are you doing? It's Gerrit speaking.
Hi, Gerrit. Fine, and you?
Well, I'm doing fine, but on the other hand, I'm not doing so well either because I don't know if you know, I'm sure you know, we're in some desperate times in South Africa. We've got this first 21-day lockdown, which has now been extended. And you know what? I didn't see this coming. So I've basically run out of money, and I was wondering, you being a trusted friend, whether I can rely on you to lend me some money in these trying times.
No, I cannot.
Oh. Did you hear that? A friend of mine put the phone down in my ear saying he cannot borrow me any money. So guys, what am I going to do now? I don't know. This is really serious. Let's hope I'm lucky. I really hope so.
Good morning.
Hi Elizabeth, how are you? It's Gerrit Viljoen speaking.
No, I'm fine, thank you.
I'm
Missing you.
I'm doing fine, but not so fine either, because I don't know if you know, but we're in a lockdown in South Africa, and it's really a tough time for all of us. So, I was just wondering, I've known you for a couple of years, if it will be possible for you to borrow me some money, please.
No.
Oh, sure. Is this at all possible? It's a friend of mine. I asked her just to borrow some money. She didn't want to. This is getting ridiculous, guys. I'm really in trouble. Maybe I must ask you whether you would borrow me some money. But as a last resort, 2 of my friends, and you saw, they declined me flat out. My only and last resort is trying to get hold of somebody in person. My bank manager that I spoke to 15 years ago. Everything is online these days, but it's like everything is closed. Maybe she would go and open the bank. Let's see if I can get hold of her. Let's see if Elna will answer the call when I need her the most. This is incredible. People don't change their cell phone numbers. So now I'm really stuck. I hope that you have a solution because I'm really in dire straits. So this brings me to my second point. What are the most common traps and pitfalls people fall into during times like this, trying times as we saw? And we see, first of all, that people get into high debt instruments. Because they haven't made provision, they now quickly have to find a solution to the problems that they are facing. And these high debt traps often also includes people going to loan sharks, not realizing the detrimental effect, because they will be paying up to 36% interest on those instruments that people run to for short-term problems. So we see that people often diligently start a good savings program. Let's call that an emergency fund. You'll see later that people don't really realize, but they start saving. And once they've accumulated a little bit, all of a sudden there's a very, very interesting phenomenon that says it's like money burning a hole in your pocket. All of a sudden they find a new fad to spend the money on. All of a sudden there's something that grabs their attention that they want to utilize this money that they've now saved up, maybe for 6 months, maybe for a year, 18 months. They now use that for this, which all of a sudden is so important in their lives. So when we see this happening, we can really say that people don't understand the importance or really know what an emergency fund is really there for. So another common trap people fall into is the fact that they, in times like this, dip into their savings accounts, their long-term savings accounts. What does this entail? It could be your pension fund, it could be a preservation fund, it could be a long-term unit trust that you earmark for your retirement. But now, because of this situation, this problem that you are facing, this crisis, you are saying, but well, I've got this money, so why don't I just use this money? I don't want to go into debt to solve this problem that I'm now facing. And this is really, really a serious problem. I don't think people understand the damage they do to their long-term financial planning when they dip into long-term savings just to satisfy a short-term need. But then you might ask, so what's so wrong with doing this? After all, it's my money. Why can't I use it if I'm in a crisis? Now, this is precisely the logic that people use. They say, well, I mean, whether I save short-term or long-term, it's all my money. Let me just take that money because it's better to go and facilitate a loan than to use this money. Not realizing that the long-term savings will be seriously jeopardized when you dip into this, and I'll explain to you right now. As I said, it's probably one of the worst things that you could do because, as it said, it's totally structured differently than a short-term savings plan. Why is this? Because you must have different instruments in your portfolio for the long term, and it will be more risky assets. It will be more equities, shares, bonds, gilts, and properties. Those are the ones that are very volatile and will fluctuate during market conditions, during volatile market conditions as we're experiencing now. So what's the problem with this? The important thing is that your investment might be down 30% because the share market has been depressed or crashed or fell. You can call it what you want. Now you are down 30% on your long-term savings and you require 10% to breach this short-term gap. So you take another 10% from your savings at the worst possible time when the savings are down, because this is normally when the crisis hits you. So that's why it's so terrible to jeopardize a long-term savings plan, because it's during times like this that you've got no control over the markets. The markets are down and now you have to dip in because according to you, it's your money, you have to take that. And that's why it's so serious and such a big mistake to make. So I hope you get it. This is really important to understand that long-term financial goals are structured fundamentally different than short-term financial goals. So what I'm actually getting at, a short-term investment is not really an investment. It's a parking place where you park the money for the day or for the time or for this event when you will suddenly need it. It's not something that you know that you can leave for a year or for 2 years. And that's why you also don't use a 1-year fixed deposit for an emergency fund, because it's just exactly that. It's fixed for 1 year. And what happens if you require that money during the time that this money is fixed? Then again, you want to dip into your long-term savings. This is why it's so critical to understand the real value of an emergency fund. So now you are at the right place asking, so what is the solution? And this brings me to my third point. What is the right instrument to use? Now, we basically alluded to that just now. But just on a lighter note, I just want to take you back to my first video where I shared with you the solar, the water, the vegetable garden solution that we have. Now, you might have thought it's irrelevant, and it might be relevant to you, but let me just tell you why it's important to me, because all three of those is actually my emergency funds. The solar, because I'm not off the grid 100%, but when there's an emergency, when there's load shedding, I can carry on. All my basic services carries on. I've got lighting, I've got TV, I've got my fridges going. So it's an emergency fund. My water, it's an emergency fund, because you might say, well, you've got 10,000 liters, but what happens if it stops raining for a while? That is why, my friend, a good friend of mine actually helped me and told me, gave me good advice. He told me to bring in the municipal water on a third level of the tanks. So basically 3,330 liters are always there, filled up by the municipal water. So when there's no rain, I've at least got 3,300 liters, which can see us through, fully functional in our household for 2 to 3 weeks. So that's an emergency fund. The vegetables, yes, you are right in saying I'm not fully sustainable, I've got no food security, but again, I didn't know about this COVID-19 situation, but because I've got vegetables, I would be able to get through quite a lengthy period if we couldn't even go to the markets to buy some stuff. And that is, to me, very, very important to have, apart from even the money situation. So let me end this off by saying, and just reiterating again, that it's very important that you will use a savings account or a money market account. Don't worry about the interest that you're receiving. The important thing is that account must be linked to your normal checking account or other account that you use. So in a crisis, you can easily transfer money to the account that you require, and that you can use that. So it's important. Don't worry about interest and thinking, yes, I need some more interest. Now, the question that you're going to ask me is, how much do I need in terms of an emergency fund? Now, roughly speaking, you basically need 6 months expenses. Whatever your basic expenses are, so that you will be able to get through a period like that. For some people, it's about 100,000. For some, it's about 60,000. But I don't think you should have more than about 100,000 in an emergency fund. If the money gets more than that, then you can allocate some of that money to your long-term savings, and that's a discussion we're going to have on another day. So it's important to utilize your emergency fund as an emergency fund and make sure that you can access it at any time. So this brings me to the bonus, and because of popular demand, people actually asked me, please, can't you add another investment to the 5 that we started off last week? Now obviously we're not there to evaluate that, but I thought it's a good idea. So I thought of including a property fund as well, because then we would have covered the range. So I decided to use the Prudential Property Enhanced Tracker Fund to the 6 investments that we will now be tracking on a quarterly basis. So I hope you're going to join us. I hope, again, hit the subscribe button so that you can know when the videos are coming up, so that you track the progress of those 6 investments. Thank you for watching, and goodbye.